Hi there. I'm going to convince you that crows eat spaghetti. You don't think so? Well, here's the proof. All spaghetti eaters have to be living things. And crows, we know, are living things. These things are not in dispute. And therefore, crows are spaghetti eaters. What? You don't think that proves anything? But it's not so easy to see what's wrong with it either. So sit back and relax while I explain how to know when a syllogism is valid and when it's just playing with words. The logic of the categorical syllogism is one of the oldest and still effective ways of arguing. Developed by Aristotle, it consists of three categorical propositions, the first two of which are the premises, or the reasons given for acceptance of the conclusion, followed by that conclusion that the premises establish. A popular example of an actually valid one is all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. In a syllogism, there are three terms that are each used twice in different combinations. The argument can be carried even further with the conclusion of one syllogism being a premise in another. For instance, all Athenians are human, Socrates is an Athenian, therefore Socrates is human. All humans are animals, therefore Socrates is an animal. All animals are mortal, therefore Socrates is mortal. Ultimately, the propositions that make up a syllogism are statements about class inclusions, to the effect of all, some, none, are or are not members of that other class. When valid, the statement the conclusion makes about class inclusion has already been implied in the premises. This can be shown using Venn diagrams, but I have chosen to teach logic without the methods that math geeks prefer, such as Venn diagrams and formal proofs. A valid categorical syllogism will have deductive validity, meaning that if the premises are true, the conclusion must also be true. Not probably, but absolutely. In the event that one or more premises is false, you don't want to believe it in practice, just point it out to whoever you're debating that his theory is based on a false assumption. Often with valid syllogisms, the phenomenon of the class inclusion already being stated in the premises makes it possible to leave out the conclusion and have it just be understood, like you can feel it coming. Although what is said in a syllogism might only be limited by human imagination, there are only 256 ways of arranging the three terms into three propositions. Only 15 of them are valid, and they can be assessed in accordance with known rules. The propositions themselves come in four different types. In order to first understand the four different types of categorical proposition, we must first look at the anatomy of these propositions. Here we see a categorical proposition in its standard form. Often in writing or speech, they are not in this form, but can be translated. This one here could be stated in a non-standard way of saying, of all the great writers of the world, not a single one of them is a cat. The quantifier will be all, no, some, or maybe even the name of a particular member of the class. The copula is the form of the verb to be. Every categorical proposition will have three properties. Quantity, which is whether it is universal or particular. Quality, which is whether it is affirmative or negative. And distribution, which is whether or not the term refers to all members of a class. We will first look at quantity and quality. The quantifier of the proposition tells us if it is universal or particular. If the quantifier is some, the copula containing or not containing a not will tell us if the proposition is affirmative or negative. Given that they can be universal or particular, affirmative or negative, we now have four possible combinations that we name after the first four vowels of the alphabet. For memorizing, notice that the first two type letters are the universals, and they are also the first two vowels in the alphabet. And as for the quality, affirm contains both A and I, and negotiate contains both E and O. Distribution is a question of whether a term refers to all members in the class mentioned. If so, it is considered to be distributed. In a categorical proposition, either, both, or neither of the subject and predicate terms may be distributed. Assessing it may take some thought, but there is a pattern. Let's look at type A. All cats are great writers. Obviously, the subject term refers to all cats because that's what it says. However, there may be great writers who are not cats, although the proposition effectively asserts at least some to be. In an A-type proposition, the subject is distributed and the predicate is not. In type E, no cats are great writers. Once again, the subject term is referring to all cats, namely that all cats are not in that other class. The predicate term also refers to the entire class. It asserts no great writer to be a cat, because if a great writer was a cat, the E proposition would be false. In an E-type proposition, both terms are distributed, being a proposition asserting mutual exclusion. For the I-type, some cats are great writers. The quantifier indicates reference to only part of the class. There is also no statement about all great writers. Some might not be cats. So in an I-type proposition, neither term is distributed. Now for the O-type, some cats are not great writers. Once again, the quantifier indicates an undistributed subject term. Here with the predicate term, distribution gets tricky to understand at first glance. It is distributed, because it asserts that no great writers are included among this some cats, and if it was, the proposition would be false. By analogy with a singular proposition, if Macbeth is not in my bookcase, it means that no shelf contains Macbeth. As an aid to memory, a universal proposition's subject and a negative proposition's predicate are distributed. And so we have the following chart of all properties of the categorical propositions. What I will do now is to take some propositions, translate them into standard form, and state properties of quantity, quality, and distribution. You can pause the video at each one if you like and create your own answer. First, robins are not mammals. A fairly easy one to start. It refers to all robins and denies that they are mammals. Propositions that start with an a, an an, or just a plural noun also refer to all in the subject term and are universal. So this is actually the E-type proposition, though. No robins are mammals. It is universal and negative. With a universal subject in a negative proposition, both subject and predicate terms are distributed. Another one, only men play professional football. The only part of this sentence indicates a hypothetical meaning, that if someone is a professional football player, he must be a man. Otherwise, he would not be playing football. So this is an A-type proposition, that all pro football players are men. It is universal and affirmative. Its subject term is distributed, but not the predicate term. And finally, not all lawyers are shysters. Particular propositions can be, and often are, more obviously particular than this one, and the task is to translate them into standard form. This one contains the universal quantifier all, but is nevertheless particular. The idea is that this proposition denies the A-type proposition that all lawyers are shysters that we would have without the not. And for that negation to be true, It must be true that some lawyers are not shysters. It is thus of type O, which is particular and negative. As such, only the predicate term is distributed. In the first and third examples, I talked about what it would mean for the given proposition to be true. This is a good trick for translating sometimes into standard form. It may also be helpful to know that A and O propositions and E and I propositions are contradictory to each other, meaning they always have the same opposite truth value. If A is true, O is false, and vice versa. If E is true, I is false, and vice versa. Now we will examine the categorical syllogism in standard form and its rules for validity. The categorical syllogism consists of exactly 3 categorical propositions that use exactly 3 terms. In the conclusion of the syllogism, the subject term of the conclusion is the minor term of the syllogism, and its predicate term is the major term of the syllogism. The term appearing in the 2 premises is the middle term. The syllogism in standard form is arranged with the major premise first, which contains the predicate term of the conclusion. Thus, in the following example, mortal is the major term, Socrates is the minor term, and men is the middle term. Okay, now for the rules and the fallacies. The middle term must be distributed at least once. A syllogism with a middle term not distributed in either premise, like the one at the beginning about the crows eating spaghetti, commits the fallacy of undistributed middle. Number 2, no term shall be distributed in the conclusion that is not distributed in the premises. A syllogism that distributes a term in the conclusion that is not distributed in the premises commits the fallacy of illicit distribution of the major or minor term. Number 3, no conclusion can be drawn from 2 negative premises. Drawing a conclusion commits the fallacy of exclusive premises. Rule 4. If either premise is negative, the conclusion must also be negative. Otherwise, it is a fallacy of drawing an affirmative conclusion from negative premises. Rule 5. A particular conclusion shall not be drawn from 2 universal premises. A syllogism with universal premises and a particular conclusion commits the existential fallacy. What is existential about it is that it assumes that something exists. An additional rule often included in logic textbooks is one of a different type, consisting in the diagnosis of an informal fallacy of meaning rather than one of class inclusion. It also occurs in non-syllogistic arguments, so one should always be on the lookout. A categorical syllogism must consist of exactly 3 terms used in the same sense, so that no ambiguous term is being used in 2 different senses, creating a 4th term. So, rule number 6 is, a syllogism with a 4th term commits the informal fallacy of equivocation. Before I go to evaluate some syllogisms with you, I want to show you 2 other ways a syllogism can be written or talked about. On the left, we have the standard form discussed earlier, only this time we have inserted variables for the subject, predicate, and middle terms. This forces us to concentrate on the form that makes it valid or not, and takes the emotions out of it. On the right, we see the mood and figure. In this case, we can talk about it as an EIO second figure syllogism, regardless of content. You have already learned the letters that make up the mood, which is just the three proposition types in order of appearance. The figure number tells us the arrangement of the middle terms. One aid for memory here is to picture the lines of the collar. So let's start testing some syllogisms. At least some liberals must be socialist, since some of them favor higher taxes, like every socialist does. The first thing to notice here is that it is not in any standard form, so I'll translate it. The terms must and since signal here that this statement is starting with the conclusion of the syllogism. Some liberals are socialists. The premises are then that all socialists favor higher taxes, and some liberals also do. So in standard form we have all socialists are persons who favor higher taxes. Some liberals are persons who favor higher taxes. Therefore, some liberals are socialists. For a first step, I will look at the premises to see if I can quickly declare invalidity. First of all, neither one of them is negative. I do see here that the middle term is not distributed in either premises. So the result is the fallacy of undistributed middle. All married people are people who know about marriage problems. No priests are married people. Therefore, no priests are people who know about marriage problems. Here I see a premise that is affirmative while the other is negative. The conclusion is also negative like one premise, and universal like the premises, so we don't have a problem there. Looking at distribution, the middle term of married people is distributed twice as a universal subject and as a negative predicate. So one more test. In the conclusion, we have an E proposition, so both terms are distributed. The major term of people who know about marriage problems is not also distributed in the premise, and therefore we have the result of a fallacy of illicit distribution of the major term. Frank's head has eyes, just as all potatoes do, and that proves he's a potato head. Here, obviously, the eyes is an ambiguous term used in two senses. In this case, there are at least 4 terms, if not 5, so we do not even need to translate into standard form. This is a fallacy of equivocation. Some teachers are smart people. All teachers are well-educated. Therefore, some well-educated people are smart people. In this case, we have affirmative premises, one of which is particular, which allows the particular conclusion. Looking at distribution, the middle term of teachers is distributed in the minor premises. Illicit distribution is not possible as we have an I-type conclusion that distributes neither term. So the result is that this syllogism is valid, and we can also state that every third figure IAI syllogism is valid. Now for some quick ones, 3 quick ones that can be declared invalid by mood alone. In the first case, we have 2 universal premises, which commits the author to drawing a universal conclusion rather than the particular one chosen. This is the existential fallacy. In the second case, we have one of the premises negative but not the conclusion. The syllogism thus commits the fallacy of drawing an affirmative conclusion from a negative premise. In the third case, we have 2 negative premises and a conclusion is being drawn. This is the fallacy of exclusive premises. So there you have it. And as a bonus for viewers who watch until the end, there will be a chart identifying all 15 valid syllogisms. You can find exercises for syllogisms on many websites out there, but my assignment for you is to start creating your own. So if you like my videos, hit those like and subscribe buttons. Thanks for watching.